Welcome to Don't Fear the Weight podcast with your host Vicky Masita, bringing together science and personal experience.
Hi guys, welcome to the next episode of Don't Fear the Weight podcast. I am your host Vicky Masita, and today I am super excited to introduce you to my wonderful guest, Dr. Scott Stevenson of Fortitude Training. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing good. It's wonderful here in Florida, as it almost always. We're getting our rain this time of the year, but we got the beautiful afternoon. It's sunny. It's like postcard perfect, and it will be torrential downpours probably within 3 hours. So I'm just living in the moment.
Living in the moment, live for today. There you go. You just got to learn to dance in the rain, and then you'll always live in the moment. So
you can too. I've gone out with dog walks recently when the rain just comes on, and one of my dogs thinks she can avoid the raindrops. Like she starts running around. I mean, if it's too bad, then she's being tortured. But when it's just sprinkling a little bit, it's absolutely hilarious because she's just sort of like trying to get away from them.
That's got to be an Instagram story, surely.
Yeah, I probably ruined my phone, filming it and getting it wet. But I think I have a waterproof phone case. I could maybe put that on Instagram.
You may get a couple of avid animal followers rather than just a big hardcore bodybuilder.
I follow probably as many dog sites as I do. Instagram's mainly a business thing for me.
Yeah.
Most of social media really is. But I follow a lot of the dog ones on there, and I watch those more than I watch a lot of the other professional stuff. Truth be told.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
Well, now we've got that nice little introduction out of the way, why don't you tell all of the listeners who exactly you are and your background, just in case they have been living under a rock for like the last 10 years.
It's so funny that, through the internet, people would know so much about me because I'm just a guy who grew up reading the muscle magazines, who just had an affinity for lifting weights. As long as I can remember, literally I asked my mom if I could, and there was no place to really do it. I wanted to do martial arts. There was not even a single dojo in my hometown when I was growing up, so there's no way to do that. And I started weight training when I was about 11 because I could do that in junior high.
Right. So
since then, I'm just someone who's just sort of fascinated with the whole metamorphosis that you can bring about. And I kind of I've become sort of a tinkerer. I still compete myself. Yeah. And so I'm the guy out there sort of racing the car, and then I also am the guy tinkering with this car in the garage. And I've been able to make a living out of doing it by being a college professor. I've owned a gym. I've been doing personal training and online coaching for, 25 or 30 years now. Probably about over 25 years for sure.
Yep.
And I just following my passion. So along the way, I'm actually a licensed acupuncturist. I don't do that actively, but that's something I've done in the past. I've had a practice, so I have sort of an alternative medicine slant. I'm very interested in the individual's individuality, and their health, and sort of, I guess you could say, sort of a philosophical perspective on what this whole endeavor means from a long-term outlook as well. I mean, people will dive into fitness regimes and then they fall out just as quickly. Adherence is horrible, especially in the Western world. And but I'm also kind of a science geek. I love the science stuff, so I dug in. I have a PhD in exercise physiology, and but I'm just kind of a knucklehead. You would never guess. I mean, looking at me, I like to just go in the gym and just go for it, just let loose. It's like jumping out of an airplane.
Awesome. Awesome.
But I also like to tinker too. You found me, I think, through Instagram in a way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean, I've been following your stuff for such a long time anyway, because I've been fascinated by, I love the word that you used, actually, the metamorphosis, because you can physically change your body into something that's really quite amazing and astounding. So I've been following your strategies for a really long time, and I love the way that you can just kind of tinker, like you said, and just make an exercise more interesting than it was, like the Meadows row. We were just having a chat before we started the podcast about you adding a handle onto the Meadows row to get a bit more of a stretch and an added stretch to hit the muscle a little bit more. So it's that kind of thing that I really, really like. What we were going to kind of look at a little bit is your specifics and strategies to women who you coach, and bodybuilding strategies for women who you coach. I'm a natural bodybuilder myself, and I compete in the athletic category. So that's just basically a mini version of a physique competitor, because I'm just very, very slight and I just don't have the size, but I can get the condition.
Right.
So what's your opinion on that? Do you have to strategize things differently for women in order to build the muscle? Because, or can you just train them as men?
Well, first of all, I need to say we mentioned Lyle because I've listened to some of your podcasts, and Lyle McDonald, basically, I think he put his entire book into the two-part that you gave, two-part interview. So there's a massive amount of science-based information on biological differences between men and women. He also noted that you differentiate between sex, which is a biological basis, and gender, which is a psychosociological basis. Differentiating, and that's actually especially, I mean, gosh, there's all sorts of controversy. For instance, a Canadian psychotherapist who's been embroiled in some legalities regarding the compulsive use of gender pronouns up in Canada. His name's Jordan Peterson, not Peters. Jordan Peters is someone I do a podcast with. Jordan Peterson. People can look into that. So people are starting to identify themselves in various ways along a gender spectrum. And the same thing holds, I'm bringing this into our conversation here, the same thing holds for what a woman or what a person, even a man would want to do in terms of metamorphosizing their physique, changing themselves.
Right.
And that's the most kind of important thing. I think if someone wants to, let's take a woman who wants to become, her affinities become as massively huge muscularly as possible and as lean and shredded. There are plenty of examples of women out there who can push to that limit in the same way that men can. I mean, if you look at the IFBB professional women, they're as conditioned or more so than a lot of the guys. They really go for it. And that's a personal choice. And then you have maybe where you would fall along the spectrum, that's sort of your aesthetic.
Yeah.
So there's a psychosocial component here, what people sort of feel like they can fit into in terms of parameters, what's okay in their social circles, what's okay in society, what's okay in their family of origin. And then there's sort of an artistic outlook, an aesthetic. So some people might like artwork that's, just flamboyant and almost unidentifiable, like there's 1,000,001 different interpretations of what might actually be there. And other people might like a more sort of naturalistic setting. Well, you can see that obviously this is a farm, there's the barn and there's the horses and the pigs and et cetera, et cetera. It's very simple. That may be appealing to them. So the same thing applies to what we can do with our bodies. And you mentioned, I can't remember if it was when we were recording or before, that there's the natural approach, and then especially in the UK where anabolic steroid performance enhancing drugs are legal for possession, that can take you along an entirely different spectrum. So with modern technology, we can really go from one end to another.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and there's one other thing too, and here's the kind of the catch, I think, especially with women, at least in Western society, is that you have to consider the person's psychological health as well. I mean, there are times I refer a lot of my clients to psychotherapists.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I try to do best to find them. I've got one of my best friends is a psychotherapist, and I've done like 6 solid years of counseling, couples counseling, that sort of thing, to try to figure out, what are the things that make me tick, and why am I doing what it is that I'm doing. I mentioned this in a podcast last week. I did a few last week. And there are some reasons that help me understand why it is I would want to create my body into something that looks freakish. It looks weird and bizarre. Why would one need that attention? So a woman, for instance, who has what might not be the healthiest psychological motives driving her, I think it's my responsibility to at least say, hey, let's think about why you're doing this. Were you, there's a phenomenon in psychology of body armoring that women will do. And a lot of times you'll see this in women that have been abused, and they'll make themselves really, really large. they'll because it makes them unattractive in a way, and they're protecting themselves psychologically from a previous attacker.
Oh, right. That's interesting.
Yeah. And that usually it's literally you're armoring your body in a way, like you've got this layer of adipose that, would protect you. And you're so big that you're no longer seen as sort of like this meek, obviously, this is sort of the easily attacked type of thing. You're a big individual. That's sort of, I think, kind of classic body arming. But women can do there's a same sort of thing, and I'm I'm an armchair psychotherapist here, but the same sort of thing can happen. Is that women will try to they'll seek out sort of a perfectionism that is covering up and protecting them from how they may actually feel about themselves deep down inside.
Right.
So that's a big first step. Literally, before you get into reps and sets and, physiological recovery and et cetera, I think looking at those things is really more important for women. But typically, women will go there where men necessarily wouldn't. You can't. A lot of guys. I have a good friend, actually a client too. And we were talking about some things, and I told him, I said, you have a female's brain, and that's a really good thing because you want to talk about this stuff. You want to talk about interpersonal relationships. You're not just a guy's guy who just swallows it and you got to keep pushing forward. And so that's something that you can bring up to women and help them in the broader scheme of things beyond just, saying you need to eat this and we're going to, add some salmon to your diet because you're lacking omega-3s, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. We're going to do something that's really more important. So I see this as just as an endeavor that's an expression of self that can be a very positive and transformative one that can really, really increase happiness and overall well-being in people's lives. And it can also just be a way to sort of dig in and exacerbate an underlying feeling of unworthiness. You're covering it up.
Yeah.
What happens when, let's say someone does go all out and they sort of change their perspective, they change their sort of sense of self-worth based on how people see them, because they were, let's say it's a woman who was using steroids or growth hormone or clenbuterol or what have you, something, and then they become this person that is like this extraordinary physical form, and when that's done, what is left? Yeah, they have to continue to do that. So that's just something we're thinking about up front. I don't want to overly belabor it, but it's important, I think.
No, I really do think that is important because you do actually see a lot of it. I have a lot of one-to-one clients. I mean, a lot of them aren't obviously physique competitors. They're just like Gen Pop clients and things. And they come to me saying that they want to change and have a complete and utter body transformation. And I always say, why? And that's one of the biggest questions that I ask them. I said, you need to find your why as to why you want to do this. Because if you want a big body transformation, it is going to take a lot of dedication, a lot of adherence, and a lot of work, and a lot of time. Yes. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, is it is a lot of time that they need to invest, and they need to be patient with it, whether you're going to be losing weight or losing body fat or actually wanting to gain those big pounds of muscle as well. And are they actually going to be happy with the end result? So like you were saying, a woman who turns to use anabolic steroids or testosterone, and that they can visually change their face, can't they? To look a lot more masculine. And do you actually go into those conversations before you start any kind of woman on any kind of assistance or cycles or anything?
I would never start them on that. I never say you should do this or you should do that. My role there is really to provide as much information as I can. But what you asked is definitely one piece of it. Is there's masculinization that is irreversible to a certain degree. Yeah. It depends on the woman, depends on the person, that's the thing. There's so much variability. Take like a drug like Winstrol versus Anavar. And there's a lot of variability as to how those will affect women. Talk to women, have had clients and friends, and they use they're like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. My sex drive is so out of control. I'm scared I'm going to break the law.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, it's laughable to me when you say it. I mean, it sounds like it's a joke, but it's not. It's like I feel like I'm losing my mind, and that doesn't always happen, and that depends on the person. So there's so much inter-individuality. There's so much biological variability across people that I think just telling people that up front, so they don't think, well, this is just this can't be. This is weird. This isn't. No one on the internet says this. This doesn't happen to anyone else. This is just me. It's like, no, that's very much a possibility. So, and, one thing that popped into my head when you were speaking there that's worth knowing too, is that you can create kind of, women can, especially with women, this will happen with men. And this is just sort of the nature of, men are from Mars, women are from Venus type of thing, is you can get an incongruence in a couple.
Okay.
Whereby a woman starts to transform and she starts looking much, much, much better. And, guys are starting to watch her as she goes by and she's getting a lot more attention. And if a man isn't doing that, then he can become very jealous, and he can literally say that you're not staying within the parameters of the sort of the unspoken agreement that we had in our relationship, that you're supposed to match me. If I'm a little bit out of shape, then you should be a little bit out of shape.
Oh, right.
You're like, now you're more extraordinary than me. It's the same sort of, when women start making more money than men, sometimes that can make them feel uncomfortable in a relationship. It's like, she earns $150,000 and I earn $75,000. That for some men, it's not an affrontal to their security whatsoever. But with other men, this can create some major relationship issues.
Sure.
You would think a sort of a secure guy would be like, my woman's a bombshell. This is awesome. Like, yeah, she's mine. We're together. This is great. This would be phenomenal. But it doesn't always work that way. And sometimes it's amazing how unexpected it is, because it's a brand new dynamic. And sort of, as a friend of mine likes to say, you live in there. You're in that dynamic. You're not seeing it from the outside. So you would never expect this person that you're in relationship with, that you're so enamored with, to become sort of this jealous sort of evil, like, he would never. Why was he acting like that? So bizarre. I can't see that in him. So that's something that may happen. It does happen with some regularity.
Yeah. It's very interesting, isn't it, how couples can kind of do this, because we get a lot of couples as well wanting to take on the body transformations together. Mm-hmm. And for one reason or another, sometimes the men adhere to it a lot better than women do, and that might be down to the menstrual cycle kicking in and saying, no, I've got to have chocolate at this time of the month, and that's the reason why their transformation is a little bit slower. And again, then the jealousy comes in. Why are you doing so much better than I am? And that kind of thing. So yeah, that's interesting to take on board, really. So, okay, so we've covered psychological and psychosocial factors when looking to a little bit. I know it's so huge, but we've dabbled a toe in, haven't we? What about then when we are actually physically looking at building muscle for women? Now, obviously, women have a harder time building muscle than men, purely for the fact that we don't have the hormones responsible enough in higher doses in order to grow those muscles. Trust me, I've been trying for 3 years, and I'm still tiny.
Right.
But why don't we have a look at the fundamentals of building muscle for women? And I'm going to use your Fortitude training as an example, because I've got the book and I've read it from cover to cover at least 17 times. So let's have a look at that. Can you actually specify that training is going to be super quality for women as well as men, including all of the muscle rounds, the rates of recovery, exercise selection, that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, there is an interesting thing. Women are smaller. They don't have as much muscle mass to begin with. Actually, women's muscle fibers tend to be smaller than men. If you look at studies where they've examined both men and women, pieces in fiber size, fiber hypertrophy are pretty much, even when you measure whole muscle cross-section area, they're about the same for men and women.
Right, okay.
Impressive. I always have to brag about this study. It was a guy named Darren, who was a sort of colleague and friend of my mentor, Gary Dudley. He's the guy that I dedicated the Fortitude training book to. Yeah. Bob had tells us about. It's a pretty far out guy. He did a lot of phenomenal studies in the early and late 90s and some thereafter at Ohio State. He a study published in 1990 showed the largest percent increase in muscle fiber cross-sectional area that I've ever seen, and it was done in women.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. They had, I think, in the type 2As, I think they may have called them at the time, like a 50 or 60% average increase in fiber size over it was like 6 months, so it was a longer study. But they trained they just trained lower body, which the women probably liked. They trained them twice a week, and they were doing like 3 or 4 exercises, 3 or 4 sets each, and most of them to failure. Fiber size increase was tremendous, but they measured thigh and waist circumferences, and they went down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
They lost body fat.
Right. Okay.
Imagine going in and you do like 3 or 4 sets of squats to failure, 3 or 4 sets of leg press to failure, 3 or 4 sets of like a hack squat machine to failure, and then 3 sets of knee extension, 3 extensions of hamstring curls to failure. You do that twice a week. You would sort of adapt or die, and women can adapt to those things. They're very, very hardy when it comes to recovering, and they did that for like 6 months. And the thing that probably happens too is when you get more fit like that, sometimes you move around more as well, and all sorts of. It's sort of a phenomenon. You start to do some things to take care of yourself. You start doing more things to take care of yourself. Like they're going in there training that hard. It's like, well, I mean, gosh, I'm not going to eat this gigantic piece of cake or go out and get drunk, what have you, because I feel so good. I want to go in there and kill it in the gym when I go in to train on Monday. So all the things sort of snowball. And yeah, I would have loved to have seen pictures. And that was I've been talking about this study for years and years because that was one of the first ones to do that, to demonstrate that much fiber growth in women. Still the record, as far as I know, that I've ever seen, men or women.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of studies done on women, though, is there? There's never any kind of studies done on women a lot, especially in muscle growth.
No, there's not, and Lyle talked about that pretty extensively in his interview too. I mean, you have to really pay close attention to the menstrual cycle. If you're doing body composition, like a DEXA or just like an underwater weighing, which they use for years, you've got all sorts of body water fluctions that you have to account for. So if someone misses if her period's a few days later, what have you, well, what do? You may have trained for 3 months and you missed their cycle because it was a weekend or whatever by a couple of days, and their body weight has just changed 3 pounds in the past 2 or 3 days. Well, that could be the entire result of your 3 months of training.
Yeah,
that's water, and that confounds the underlying assumptions of the body composition estimation methods. So that's like it's just a giant pain in the butt. Guys are just a lot easier to study, and there's sociological reasons, and men tend to dominate the exercise physiology research, have for years. Not so much anymore. There are a lot more women that are getting involved, and then like yourself, then they're starting to focus on like sort of bringing up the women's side of things. But it's just much more difficult to study for those physiological and sociological reasons.
Yeah, definitely.
So what you do find, though, is that women can increase muscle mass pretty substantially. One of the things that Lyle talked about is levels of testosterone. And women with polycystic ovarian syndrome will tend to put on muscle more easily. There's actually a study from Scandinavia, and it was almost embarrassing to talk about it because they correlated free testosterone levels with muscle cross-sectional area growth. It was a very small number of subjects. The correlation was 0.99. It's like almost perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see a correlation does not imply causation necessarily, but when you see a correlation that's like dead on like that, you have to think there's got to be something underlying this phenomenon.
Yeah.
So some women will grow really. I have a friend here in Florida, and she's always put on muscle really, really easily. She had a little more hair on her arms when she was a kid. She was embarrassed by it. Yeah. So it's just higher levels of testosterone. So back to your original question now, there's huge variability among women. There's huge variability among men. And this is what I spoke about actually at Body Power when I was in the UK last. It's biological interindividuality. There are people who will not increase fiber size or strength or aerobic capacity, depending on what you train for, at all. Over the course of several months of training, like nothing. They're going in, they're being pushed by the same set of researchers that are pushing all the other clients, all the other subjects. And then there are some that are just extreme responders, and they'll just, grow. I mean, we're talking like 50% increase in fiber cross-section area over 2 months with one person, and then someone else gets nothing.
Yeah, I know. I hate those people.
you want to like eliminate them from the gene pool because it's not fair, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that is just one example. The same thing goes for drug responsiveness, drug side effects. Pretty much you name it. I tell people, like, go to the mall in the States, especially. And now we've got so much overweight and obesity that's probably it's a matter of our quote unquote food supply, that you're seeing sort of what happens when you impose that caloric excess and availability on people in terms of their body fat. And we got this huge widening. You will still see people that are thin, rail thin, and that are eating whatever they want. There was what was the movie? I think it may have been Super Size Me, where there was a guy who ate McDonald's every day for years. Yeah. He was rail thin. He was like really. You might think that he had anorexia nervosa. Yeah, like something. But he's eating fast food. Someone else eats fast food like that, and they'll just balloon up, like the guy Morgan Spurlock, who did that movie, was experiencing.
Yeah. So
you'll see that, and that applies to responsiveness and trainability. It also applies to recovery abilities, when those are sort of interwoven, of course. So that's what I've done with Fortitude training is set it up with, it's a high frequency training system. We can kind of get into that, but I've set it up to allow for people who can recover from a higher training volume with the different volume tiers, and then 2 different versions to vary the frequency. And that depends too. The other thing with women you'll find is, just like with guys, some guys want to go in there and just absolutely just let loose. They want to do too much. And then some guys are like, they'd rather talk, and right. They don't really want to do much. They're looking for everything but but deadlifting and heavy pressing and they're looking for all the foo-foo exercises that will make things easier. And so that applies to men and women. So how hard someone trains is highly variable as well. So as far as just setting up the training program, in terms of that sort of basic component of recovery, there's so much variability among men and women. There's so much overlap that you can't necessarily say, this woman, is going to have to do, X more than a man, which she might. I mean, they do tend to recover quite well. And some of that it's estrogen related. It seems to help with, it has an antioxidant effect. It seems to help with muscle recovery, reduces muscle soreness. Women do better with pain. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably a biological thing. Everyone attributes it to, childbirth, having to make it through that. And when they do, some of the pain testing, like pressure algometry, or they've got a real brutal when you put your hand in ice water.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, those are nasty. And women rate things lower in general than men do on average, but that's not always the case. We did a study when I was in. This is kind of a fun study. It was fun in a lot of ways. It's very informative for me when I was in grad school for a private company. I'm not going to say who it was. I've mentioned before. People could probably figure it out. Yeah. And we did some muscle soreness work, and I was doing all sorts of pain testing, soreness testing, those sorts of things. And we had, 80 subjects. We just got as many people. We paid them pretty well. And this was University of Georgia. And I remember I would know him because I would do the strength testing and see how much after the damaging exercises strength was lost. And that will tend to be correlated with the amount of pain that you feel when you repeat that exercise. How much does it hurt? How much is a muscle? The more it hurts, the less likely you are to push. And the more damaged the muscle is, the less of the ability of the muscle to actually produce force. So it all kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's all in our heads too. So there were times when I remember there was a visual analog scale, 10 centimeters long, so about yay big, and I was pressing with a given amount of pressure on the muscle on the quad in a certain area where they said they felt the most soreness, and then they would give me a rating, and so might be 20 out of 100, 20 out of millimeters at 100 millimeters. And there were a couple. I remember some women coming in who had just wanted the money. They were they didn't exercise on a regular basis. Very, very sort of. These were women who were in sororities. They were kind of like, oh, as long as they don't break a nail, they'll be fine. Not sort of rugged, not. This is just way outside of their normal. They want life to be as easy as possible.
Okay.
Hoping probably to marry a millionaire in college and just live on a yacht the rest of your life. I mean, there is a reason for stereotypes, and these women sort of were in that area.
Yeah.
And so I knew how much strength they lost because we just tested them, and then we'd press, and they might say, oh, that's a 60 out of 100.
Okay.
And I used to tell them 100 pain is when I take a samurai sword and I slice through the middle of your body, and you're in that split second before you're losing consciousness, and I've just cut you in half. That's 100 out of 100. That's max pain right there. So they're saying this is 60, and I'm pressing on them, on their leg, and they're saying it's 60. There was a guy who came in, and he got decimated by the exercise.
Okay.
And I pressed, and he's like, it doesn't really hurt. I'm like, there's no pain at all. I'm like, he's like, I mean, yeah. So he put the mark as close to 0 as he could, is like 2 or 3 out of 100. And he was like that all the way through. I mean, none of this really fazed him at all. And I asked him afterwards, I said, so I just got to ask you, man, like your pain, like this didn't bother you one bit, but you lost a lot of strength. So we know we did something to the muscle. And have you had some painful experiences when you were a kid or anything? He's like, yeah, I had open heart surgery like 3 or 4 times, something like that. Like literally this is when they like cut through the chest.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
he'd gone through that. And he said, I was kind of a daredevil when I was a kid. He said once he jumped his dirt bike over like a wrought iron fence with like posts sticking up, like and he missed, and he fell and he impaled himself like on this fence, and he was there for like hours before someone found him.
Oh my God.
So he's like, like straight out of a horror flick. He's like lying there. So his perception of what 100 out of 100 was, he literally had probably experienced that on the verge of death. So we damaged his leg, and it's like, I'm pressing on his leg. It's like, that's nothing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fluffy exercise.
That's like exactly. There's nothing you're going to do to me, and like you can light me on fire, and it's not going to be as bad as what I've experienced in the past. So that's very, very important, I think, in terms of someone's perception of how hard training is, how hard they're willing to push themselves, how driven they are. It can also be too much. I'm a big believer in auto-regulation. Which is a skill that takes quite a while to learn. You'll have to I've always had to do this, sort of push past your limits. Like to figure out where the line is, you kind of have to step over it and realize, okay, I just destroyed myself. Now this is too much. Don't do that again. That's not going to benefit you in terms of, improving yourself as a bodybuilder to go that hard. You just lose muscle. You just do too much. But once someone has done that, that being able to incorporate their perception of pain, like that guy, he'd have to be really, really attuned to himself if he wanted to be a bodybuilder, because like there's nothing that he could do in the gym that would faze him. So he'd have to recognize, like, okay, my mind is much stronger than my body.
Yeah. Whereas
a lot of people, their bodies may be much stronger than their minds, and that will change over the course of time as well. So with women, it's sort of like you've still got that same adjustment that's going to happen, and people run up against some point like, this is as hard as I want to push. Like, I don't want to do anymore. I want to be able to go home and feel normal and interact with my husband, my wife, my kids, whatever I may be doing. Whereas some people, like, okay, as long as I'm not throwing up by the time I get home, I'm good.
Yes, they get it all out in the gym.
Yeah, right. Then I'm good. And they'll go home and like just collapse. They're okay with that. They enjoy that. That's part of how they're, the screws are loose in their own particular brain.
Yeah.
So that's something you have to sort of figure out with women. Some women are because they've been socialized, like pushing is not going to It's not within their normal. It's just not feminine or women to go in and, and sweat in the gym and go for it. Whereas other women just want to just blast through it.
Yeah.
So I think there's more variability because men are supposed to be hardcore and masculine and push hard. They feel like that they don't. Whereas some women are very, they're like, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to break a nail. I need to get gloves. I don't have calluses on my hands. And then other women are like, let's go for it. Let's just kick some ass. And they have incredible pain tolerance, and they can bury men in the gym.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to really pay closer attention to that, I think, with women. And that's why I've set up Fortitude training the way I have, is so that it's highly adaptable in that sense.
And I really like that, because you can actually make it personable to you as well, can't you? It's not just like a cookie cutter program that you can get from bodybuilding.com or T Nation or, the
Right.
mass builder ones and things like that. You can make it very, very personable to you. So what about, just talking about being personable then, what about when you were to prescribe a training program for one of your particular one-on-one clients or your online clients, and you wanted to use Fortitude training, but would you make it specific to their body parts that you needed to bring up, for example? Like, say that their glutes are really lacking behind their upper body. Would you make them do more volume on their glutes and their hamstrings as opposed to doing the all-over body workouts?
It's all about the glutes, right?
All about the glutes.
That wasn't just a random example that popped in your head.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think so. There are a couple of ways that I will stand. Generally, yes, bringing up weak body parts is something it can take years and years to do. It may never even happen. So if a woman is competing in a division where she literally needs to bring something up, let's say she's in physique, in your division, I don't even know, you probably would have, glutes are always going to be a focus, I would think. So the first thing I would do is look at exercise selection. So I've got 3 different set types in Fortitude training. I've got heavy loading sets. I've got a muscle round, which is a type of cluster set. So it's an you like these? I think.
Yeah, I love them.
They're very cool. They're a lot of fun to do. And those are sort of selected on an auto-regulatory basis. You kind of figure out what you want for that day. And there's also pump sets, and those are higher rep sets that are continuous. And there's sort of various ways to do those. Those are sort of geared at metabolic stress. So as far as pump sets go, you've got the same sort of thing going on with progressive orderly recruitment of motor units. You use the type 1s initially, but the weight is lower. So maybe 50 or 60% of 1 rep max. And you'll rotate amongst those type 1 low threshold motor units. The nervous system is very smart. It sort of trades off. If it's got 100 motor units available, it'll use maybe 60 or 70 of them, but it'll have them work intermittently. And then as fatigue ensues, they'll start recruiting more and more. And there'll be some increase in firing rates, but for the most part, when a motor unit comes on, it's at a firing rate that will produce a nice, smooth tetanus in terms of contraction. You don't want a motor unit going like this. But that's what happens when people get to that failure rep, especially with heavy stuff. We see people shaking. That's because they can't activate the muscle at a high enough frequency to produce a smooth force. So when that shaking happens, that's inhibitory influences, because the forces are usually so high. So, but by the time you get to that failure rep, 25 or 30 on a pump type set, you're still going to be using all the muscle mass that's available there, as much as you possibly can call upon. So you look at the studies when they use blood flow restriction or high rep training, you still see increases in type 2 fiber size. It's not as if, and it's funny, there's actually a review that, I think it's in the Strength Conditioning Journal that Brad Schoenfeld did. Where he does great stuff. Well, I was digging through that review hoping that he's going to provide some information showing that higher reps type sets will preferentially produce type 1 fiber growth, and it's not really there. He goes through sort of a rationale, but the studies simply are not there. What you do tend to find with bodybuilders who do a lot of high rep, high volume, sort of traditional bro type splits, that you have very large type 1s, and the type 2s aren't as large as what you see in powerlifters. So there's some differences there. But basically, either as long as you take things to failure, as long as you or close to it. As long as you push hard, you're going to get all the muscle that's available. So, but the loading sets are focusing on one way to produce muscle growth, heavy load, and the pump sets are about metabolic stress. And then your favorite, the muscle rounds, are sort of a combination. It's a way to take a weight you could maybe do 15 reps with if you did like a continuous set. So rep without stopping, and then you failed at 15. You break it up into sets of 4 with about 5 breaths or 10 seconds in between. If you're doing legs, I always watch the clock, because 5 breaths are like that. And you might get 22 reps before you fail. And the way I program those to, people have heard me talk about this kind of ad nauseum, but I try to limit the number of failure reps. It's those failure reps when you are shaking, when you like really push to where you're doing something that's beyond anything you do other than that time when you're in the weight room, that really taxes your nervous system. That's what really, sets people back where they can't recover very well. So I limit the muscle rounds to just one failure point, and then you drop the weight back down if you fail before you get to the 6th set of 4. Okay. Yeah. So, but as far as back to what you asked about, I'll bring up the glutes, for instance.
Yeah.
There's a couple things. The loading sets, the way I do those is with compound exercises and isolation exercises. So typically for a guy he wants to have, well-developed glutes, he might use a knee extension and a hamstring curl of some sort as his isolation exercises for the thighs.
Yeah.
But literally thighs in this context are going to be glutes too, because you're getting those with compound exercises. So a woman might actually do something instead of alternating between, like, let's say, a squat and a knee extension, a squat and a hamstring curl. She might do a wide squat, like almost a sumo style squat that targets the glutes more so. And she might even do a hyperextension of some sort. Or a glute ham raise before she does the split squat. So now she's pre-fatigued and activated the glutes. That would be her first set of 10 to 12 reps to failure. She take her breaths or take her rest before she goes to that heavy squat with the feet out wide, like a sumo style squat. And then she might even go back and do like maybe a hamstring exercise if she needs to bring up her hams more so than her quads. So that's just on the day of Fortitude training. We're doing the heavy loading stuff. So you've preferentially focused on the glutes there because you're using an isolation movement for the glutes and hamstrings. And you could even use a glute blaster if you wanted to. You could do that. That's nothing wrong with that. Literally, especially if that's one that works well for you. And then so there's the order of exercises, and then there's the actual exercise and how it's performed as well. So leg presses, people call them ham presses. Sometimes we get driving with the heels and feet are up high. Those hit the hamstrings and the glutes more so. So women don't want to have gigantic thighs, quads especially, but a nice hamstring from the side, a nice rounded hamstring, and then a rounded glute looks awesome.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. So that will be the loading sets. Muscle rounds and pump sets, the same sort of thing. You just pick the exercises that work really well for you and order them. So if for your thighs, you're going to do, let's say, an isolation exercise, you might choose one for glutes and do a muscle round that way, and then do a leg press. Do the leg press, as I just mentioned, with the kind of the hamstring press. And then maybe another compound exercise like a hack squat or a hip sled style with the feet out wide. So you can, you've targeted glutes on the loading sets and the muscle rounds, and then you'd also have the pump sets, and you could do the same thing there too. This basically apply the same strategy. The thing about the pump sets that I think works really well is that's in Fortitude training. I've sort of set that up. You want that to increase frequency and also make use of that kind of separate metabolic stress based way to produce muscle growth. But it's also a really, and this is the thing I've mentioned this, I don't know how many times on my board. I have a discussion board. Are you on the board? Have you gotten on the board that I have?
No, I haven't actually. I'm going to have to get the link on that.
Yeah, with the purchase email that I send out, I let people know they have a free lifetime. As long as I'm alive and doing it, you've got a subscription to my discussion board, and I answer questions there on a daily basis. Most of which I've answered again and again and again, but this is the biggest one. is how to bring up weak muscle groups. And the thing that people don't necessarily think about, they sort of think of the pump sets like, I'm just going to go get a pump. And there is some truth to that. But that is a way to do what a lot of people want to do. They like, if I want to bring their chest up, well, I'll just do 20 sets for my chest. I'm going to just focus with more volume. Like instead of, using a more refined instrument, they want to just, hit with a hammer more and more and more. And increase the volume. Well, one of the things about doing the pump sets that I think especially helps a lot of people is it allows them to create that sort of mind-muscle connection with the pump sets. A lot of times they're isolation types things. So you see someone, you can even watch women, you've probably seen this in the gym, who do squats. They don't have very developed glutes. Yeah. And the way they do squats and deadlifts, they don't hinge much at the hip. You just don't see that happening. You can tell when someone is really, really good at activating a particular muscle group. You can just tell they just have a knack for it a lot of times. And then some people, they will use as much muscle mass as possible. It is a very efficient and sort of economical way to move weight around, but not what we want from a bodybuilding perspective, because you want to put as much loading on the muscle you're trying to target as possible. So pump sets will allow you to do that. You've got a prolonged, 45-second, 60-second set where you're just trying to target the glute or what have you. So you're learning that. And I think there's specificity of training, of course, but you're learning how to activate the glute. You're learning how to in this case, or whatever muscle you're trying to bring up. You're learning how to feel that connection. And then you know how your glutes feel when you really just target, just laser-like focus, targeted them. So then you sort of can seek that out, and when you're doing the heavier things or muscle rounds, you can recreate that sense. So you're creating some biofeedback experience with the pump sets. So that's part of what the pump sets help with, I think, is not just sort of an afterthought. Okay, I'm going to do blah blah blah, get this done with, so I can get out of here. There's the different techniques too. I don't know if you messed around with like the 5s into the hole.
Yes.
You seen that one? Yeah. A lot of people, I just made that up one day, and that's the thing. You can make things up, you can literally just be creative and like sit down and, start doing a pump set. It's continuous, movement, and, do 3 or 4 reps. It's like, I really feel, when I'm at full extension, this is really nice. And just do some pulses there, and then go into the deep stretch feels great too. And I'm figuring out how to activate my glutes when I've got a lot of hip flexion. So you might do, 4 pulses here, 2 full reps, and then 4 pulses at the top, 2 full reps, 4. I'm just making this up as you go along. And you're literally like, you're teaching yourself by going in and just sort of fiddling around in the movement, how to create as much metabolic stress and pain and what eventually will be a pump when you stop the exercise afterwards. Yeah. So you can take those pump sets, and I've got some clients, these are the ones whose legs go really well. They especially haven't done this on legs, and the pump sets are the hardest things they do in the whole program, because they just literally, you learn how to sort of manage your fatigue, and you're maintaining contraction the entire time. So, and if you're someone who really, if you're really focused on bringing up that muscle group and you're just like almost a little bit pissed at it for not growing the way it's supposed to, this is your chance to sort of like, you come with a bastard, I'm going to bring you up. You're coming with me. You're going to grow. I'm going to make this happen. So you get in there and you like, okay, I'm not going to get another 3-4 full reps. So I'm going to do some pulses here at the top, some at the bottom. I think I can dip down and come back up and do another full rep, and then I'm going to do some pulses in the middle. We go up to the top because I think I can do some more pulses there, and then I'm going to do a sort of a pulsing negative until I get to the very bottom, and then I die.
Oh my God, that sounds disgusting.
Yeah, right. I mean, exactly. So instead of those 3 reps and being done in 8 seconds, the description there took me 15 seconds to go through. So you've just increased the quote unquote time under tension. You've increased the metabolic stress. Yeah. And plus you got that learning factor. You learn how to really kind of know what it feels like when that muscle's getting taxed. Yeah. So those pump sets are really, really key from an autoregulatory standpoint. In that, you've only got so many recovery resources. Yeah, so exactly. Someone has they have great delts and a great back and what have you, a great upper body, and they want to shift the focus of their training to lower body. Then when they do their lower body pump sets, they would really do those in a diabolical fashion. Yeah. Like hateful pump sets. you might call them. And then when they come around, it's like, I don't need more upper body. You know, that does need to happen for me. So they would do their pump sets, and they might just do like, 20 reps straight set.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one basic way to do things. That's sort of the way I suggest people first do that, because they have then the community of people that are following the volume tiers the way I've set them out, which is generic. But then there's also the possibility of like, well, and I even hesitate to say this because I want people to sort of learn how to fine tune their training as much as possible before taking a sort of the blunt instrument approach to it. But you can use different volume tiers for different muscle groups. Yeah. And that's kind of, a lot of people want to do that right off the bat. So I'm going to use volume tier 3 for my weak ones, and volume tier 1 for my strong ones. And that you're not probably going to figure out that mind muscle connection and figuring out the exercises that work for you, and sort of figuring how to work around your own nervous system's proclivity for using some muscles more so than others is sort of the knack of bodybuilding to a certain degree. I had a guy once, long time ago, his dad had retired. He'd worked construction for years, and he wanted to start just kind of get in shape, eat too many burgers on the job and that sort of thing. And his dad had literally like been worked like deep in like, God, I think they're like just building construction, picking up heavy stuff all the time for like 50 years since he was a teenager. So he knew how to pick up stuff and use as much muscle as possible. His brain had been wired that way for decades upon decades. And we're just trying to do a biceps curl, a dumbbell concentration curl. So he had his arm brace up against his knee, standard kind of bent over, almost a thinking man position. And I just wanted him to do this. Simple as that. He could not do it. He had to do this just because he was hinging with the shoulder so that he could do an isometric contraction in his elbow flexors, which is more efficient and easier to move the weight with. So he was using as much muscle as he could. I was literally grabbing him by the shoulder and don't move your shoulder, just move your elbow. He couldn't do it.
It's crazy, right?
He was just totally wired for using as much muscle as possible. So eventually we kind of worked around that. He's literally looking at himself. You're right. I can't help myself. I can't stand it. So we've got motor activation, muscle activation patterns that are wired that are, I think, a lot of times what keep people from developing weak muscles because you're just not used to using them. And the other thing, of course, is, especially with guys, ego.
Ego lifting. See a lot of that in the gym, and it pisses me off to the nth degree because it's just like, I was doing a leg day with my training buddy the other day, and I was lifting an 85 kilo squat, and I was doing that for a set of 10.
Wow.
And there were these two guys who were there, and they were staring at me, and I'm not quiet in the gym, unfortunately. I just can't help myself.
Right
I'm
on.
a bit loud.
Right on. It's fun.
It is, right? And these guys said, Jesus, she lifts more than me. And then they kind of got under the bar and put like another 40 aside on. And I was expecting them to, go into a deep squat because they were big guys and all the rest of it. They went down maybe about 4 inches and then came back up and then just kind of wobbled all over the place and hit the bar back over. And it was just like, do you know what? Just because I'm a girl and I can outlift you, what's the point in putting more on the bar just to kind of make an arse of yourself?
Yeah.
Because now I think you're a dick. So that was my honest opinion. And it was just like, I don't care. But you see, I'm quite hard on myself in that regard because I train with mass monsters. That I weigh 110 pounds. My training partner, he weighs like 210 pounds. So he's 100 pounds heavier than me. He's an assisted male bodybuilder. I'm a female natural bodybuilder. So we're completely two different ends of the spectrum, But his weights want me to lift more. It makes me want to lift more, but I won't push to the fact that I'm going to actually either hurt myself or compromise form, because then I'm not going to be hitting the muscle that I need to hit.
Right. And that's self-awareness.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And I think that's what you were talking about in your Fortitude training as well, like doing the tiers in certain ways and like your ego, and I'm just going to go straight in, balls out to the wall, and I'm going to be massive in 4 weeks because I'm doing this training, and it just doesn't work like that, does it?
No, it's a matter of time.
So Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. So just moving on slightly then, because I know that I'm taking up so much of your time, but you're so cool. It's easy. So just moving slightly on, in helping those muscles grow, we obviously need to be taking care of our nutrition as well. So nutritional strategies when it comes to fortitude training or just bodybuilding in general. Would you overfeed a female the same way that you would overfeed a male, for example, or would you preferential macronutrient splits?
It's always going to be individualized. So that's just one piece. If you think of it sort of scientifically, if you could come up with sort of a regression equation, and you would factor gender in there or sex in there. You'd factor all these psychological things we talked about. You'd factor in body mass and muscle mass, of course, and a whole host of other things. So the role that someone, whether it's a man or a woman, and how they identify, it might be pretty minor, to be honest. If maybe a better way to imagine this is, if we had, let's say you had a brother, a fraternal brother. So he's the same. He's a little bit smaller than you. He's the same weight as you.
Okay.
And he trains with you. You would have a little more body fat than him.
Yep.
A little less muscle mass. I mean, right, but who knows? You may be more. I mean, maybe if he's somewhat diminutive, you actually have more than. It's possible, that you might be, more genetically gifted from a bodybuilding standpoint than even he is. It's it has happened. You probably know people who have brothers like that. Well, one brother, usually it's guys. One brother is just like totally gifted, and the other one's like, what the heck? Or there's just something. I had a client once who had a form of dwarfism that he really wasn't even. We figured it out medically that he really was sort of a bit of a dwarf. He was very, very short. He wasn't, like 3 feet tall, but he had a brother that was over 6 feet tall, and he was more like 5 feet tall.
Oh, okay, fine.
He had pan-hypopituitarism, so he had some reduced growth hormone, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So, but the differences there would be you've got a little less muscle mass, so we're gonna expect rate of gain to be slightly less, but not tremendously less. Okay. The variability in terms of your responsiveness is going to be a main factor. And so what I would do is just like I would with a guy is look at the mirror, look at the scale, and I use skin folds in the places where the person holds fat, and consider that in terms of the long haul. So let's say that you have your lower body fat is just unbelievably stubborn, and we know that in order to get from where you typically end up off season to where you want to be on stage is at least a 6-month diet for you.
Sure.
We're not going to blast you up past a skin fold thickness that's going to take you like 5 years to diet off. Even if you're making great gains, even if you're gaining a ton of muscle mass and your strength is awesome, because then we know, like, well, do you want to spend like 9.5 months dieting? Probably not. So you would consider that. The other thing too is the relationship with food, which can be very different for women versus men. The extent to which food is a comfort for them can be important, and just the propensity for disordered eating. Eating disorders I can't remember that there's a much higher body dysmorphia and much higher relative rate of eating disorders in women versus men.
Definitely,
So one of the things that, like, I use a nutrient timing approach with a lot of people, not everyone, but that's what I have in the book. It's kind of one of the generic ways to do this, where you have kind of a post-workout period and you load the food in there.
Okay.
And for some, it just makes sense to do that. From a biological standpoint, physiological standpoint, the nutrient timing thing is like a whole other podcast and topic.
Yeah.
But if someone were to fall into a pattern where, they're eating food, let's say it's a woman and she's eating food she doesn't like, she's kind of feels kind of yucky and starving, and she's like kind of craving things on her non-training days, and on her training days she becomes like this like Gollum monster to have like all these yummy foods, and you create like this disordered eating pattern. And some people might say it's disordered eating, to go from no carbs on non-training days to like, bagels and rice cakes and jellies and sorbet. I use sorbet as a carb up food, eating all this delicious stuff to back to like nothing, no carbs at all. That's disordered for some people.
Yeah.
For others, it's just like the guys, like, I got to put oil in my car. I got to put gas in my car. I got to wash the car. I got to wash the wheels off, blah, blah, blah. Those things are just part of how it works. And for a woman, it might be different. So you have to kind of consider that. And then one of the things that this just goes for guys and women. I always ask this question, and it's probably, it's more relevant for women, I think, too, is I think psychologically, there's so many cool things that are really not all that well understood in terms of like placebo effects and expectancies. I've written a couple articles on Elite FDS about this and talked about it on some podcasts. And our brain can really create a physiological reality. We can make things happen. We can make pain disappear. We can improve performance. We can disinhibit hypnosis. When I mentioned hypnosis and amphetamines, I was actually referring to a study where they did those sorts of things with people in the 60s. So what can happen with people if someone's in an off-season mode and they're gaining and they're becoming, the whole idea is to have a better feeling about how one's body looks. And if they're gaining fat in a way that they don't really like, a man or a woman, they don't like the way their clothes feel. There's part of, they will self-sabotage in terms of how they eat or what they do. Gosh, I had a friend, actually, he came up to me and asked if I would train his girlfriend.
Okay.
And I said, well, who's she working with? And she was working with a really well-known trainer. Who's actually a friend of mine. He's a great guy. He's a great trainer. Has tremendous success with women. And I'm like, well, what's going on there? And she's like, well, what she was doing was eating a bunch of food because she was falling into this pattern. And then she was doing extra cardio on her non-training days and not telling him about it. It was like every time I'd see her in the gym, she's doing cardio.
All right.
Like, well, that makes sense of doing a lot of cardio. And she wasn't happy with the idea of gaining body fat, I think was kind of the underlying factor there. So if you push someone to the point where they're getting sort of dissatisfied with their body image, they can sabotage, like overtly, like literally she wasn't telling her coach about her cardio. She was doing things. But I also think there can be like a sort of a psychobiological impact there where your body just doesn't want to go the path that you've set out for it, at least on paper, because subconsciously, just like a placebo effect, it's not what you really want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, subconsciously it's like, I want to get strong, I want to get big, I want to grow muscle, but I don't want to be fat.
Yeah, I don't want to be fat. And who are the examples? You go into a typical gym, you see a lot of competitors. When competitors, especially women, when they look good, they're wearing all the stuff that shows that. You go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, like we're just barraged with these images of absolutely perfect women, perfect feminine physiques, and they don't show how they look in their off season and their worst, so to speak, without makeup. No. Not very often. More and more I'm seeing this though. It's actually kind of cool. Women are like coming out, it's like, here's what I look like when I wake up in the morning and I'm off season. And it's great. It's freaking awesome. But
I've started doing it now, wearing my headphones just after I finish cardio, because I do cardio in the mornings. It's the only time that I can do it. And I come out of the gym and I'm just like, right, cardio done. Now I really need a shower because this is ridiculous. And this is the way that you should look after cardio. Yeah.
Right. Some honesty there. So, but guys are okay with that. Like I used to like to train with powerlifters when I was in Arizona. I had a few years where I got to train with some powerlifters. Because those guys just like all they wanted to do was, especially in the off season, they just want to be big and strong. They don't care what they ate or how they looked or, how bloated they were or whatever. They just friggin' went for it. Yeah. The self-consciousness was really, really low. Whereas bodybuilders, especially, men and women, can be very kind of superficial, like it's a different sort of approach to things. So a woman can just sabotage, I think, because there's no one around to sort of say, it's okay to gain a little bit of fluff. We're going to get rid of it. You've dieted for the last 5 years. The dieting sucks, but you always get rid of the body fat. It will come off. But we need to get you, and I'm putting together some other materials that will hopefully be out in a while, but I've actually created a table for men and women based on what their body fat percentage would be on the day of a contest, and given I think like maybe a 12 or a 16 or a 20 week diet, what a reasonable amount of fat loss would be, so that you can sort of say, if I'm going to get down to 10% body fat as a woman on stage, and I weigh 150 pounds, and I'm going to be 120 pounds at 10% body fat. That's 108 pounds of fat-free mass. And I want to go to 120 pounds of fat-free mass. And I still have a 16-week diet. This is all on this sort of big chart.
Yeah.
How much weight am I going to need to get, and how much body fat will I have? So if you go to 25% body fat, you might get that fat-free mass. But what kind of a diet do you need? Yeah. The diet would take forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's part of the thing with planning an off season, is considering what your goals are in terms of gaining muscle mass. Do you want 3 pounds of muscle mass? You may have a category you need to stay within. Like, you can't gain X amount of weight, otherwise you'll just be in a different category.
Yeah.
And so if you sort of set that out mathematically, it's a way to sort of circumvent this perception. It's like, I weigh 115 pounds now. I'm not going to get above 122 because we've already set that out. That's only 7 pounds. It's okay. I'm going to keep doing what my coach says to do. I'm going to gain this weight, and it's fine. It's only another 7 pounds. We've already got these boundaries set up so that I can't sabotage myself. I'm not going to go to 145. I'm not going to like balloon up. And it's a way to sort of objectify what's going on, so you can step back and be a watcher of your own experience and a watcher of your own progress in the way that a coach would be.
Yeah.
So
I love the sounds of those tables. Those are really good. That would be really good to have.
Yeah. I mean, it would require. The nice thing is you can do, and I've talked about this before, I think, on podcasts, is if you find someone who does DEXA. A lot of people in the UK are doing DEXA. I have a lot of clients do it. And I have people do skin folds in just wherever they can get. If they have a significant other who can get like, a subscapular one or something like that, if that's where they hold fat, wherever you can do, places that you hold fat at, that you want to make sure you don't have fat when you're on stage. You can actually create your own prediction equation based on your skin folds and what DEXA has. So if like your skin folds are 20 and that DEXA tells you you're at 12% body fat, and then your skin folds are 30 and DEXA tells you you're at 18% body fat, and then when your skin folds are 40, DEXA tells you you're at 26% body fat, you now have a relationship between your skin fold measurements and DEXA measurements that's specific to you, and where you do those skin folds next to those freckles or whatever birthmarks or whatever landmarks you use.
Yeah.
And now you have a way to say, okay, between 20 and 30 millimeters on my skin folds, that means I'm somewhere between 12 and whatever I said, 18 or 20% body fat. You have your own, and then you don't have to go and spend the $80 or whatever it is for the DEXA. And you've taken that information and put it outside of yourself, and you're like, you know what? I'm having a body dysmorphia day.
Yeah.
Which that's why I love like some days, guys, especially you're like, oh my God, it looks so small. You get in the wrong mirror, and it's like the mirror takes off 20 pounds of muscle, or it makes you look, or women, it has 20 pounds of fat. It's like the camera does when you get on TV. Then you have those skin folds that are there. Those are objective. As long as you're not fluffing the skin folds, which some personal trainers will do.
Yeah.
So I think the long-term goals and planning and sort of setting out where are we going to go during this off season, as opposed to, God, he told me I need to add 50 more grams of carbs and I already feel fat. I don't want to do that. Maybe like, what if I added like 30 grams of fiber and 20 grams of carbs, then I'll poop and I'll feel flatter. I've heard of all sorts of strange things. I've heard of women taking creatine because it causes diarrhea, so they could, as a laxative, Yeah. So there's all sorts of weird things that can happen. But if you have that sort of set out in terms of a long-term plan, that you can sort of look back, it's like, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to, the horses are not going to like just run free here, and we've got the reins on everything. We're going to be okay. Then how much to make those changes with a particular woman back to your client in terms of how to adjust the diet.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's really vital.
And I think it's really important as well to explain to your client what your plan is for the up and coming off season personally, because I think if you just keep everything to yourself as a coach or a personal trainer, your client is then like what you were saying about your friend's missus. She was just like doing extra things because she wasn't aware of the plan that was going to take place, because it was right, well, let's add 50 more grams of carb, but no explanation given, as to why we're going to give that extra grams of carbs and why I don't want you to do the extra cardio. So I think it's important to actually explain that plan as well to the client.
She may have been explained to her. This is a really good coach who she was working with at the time. She may have just sort of blown it off, but connecting with that. I mean, at some point, online training does have that as a limitation. You can't see the person. It's always going to kind of be there. But I totally agree. Having that all kind of laid out. And the other important thing is, coaches. A lot of coaches, this is one of the worst things. They like to keep people in the dark. They make clients sort of almost
reliant
upon. Like, you don't know how to do any of this. I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing. It's like, only I can work the magic. I'm the Wizard of Oz, behind my big facade, and like, you can't do this on your own. And my whole goal is to make people independent, autonomous exercises. I want to put them in control of their own path as much as possible.
Yeah, same.
When people want to say, I don't want to think about things, I'm like, well, it's probably not a good client for me, because I want people who want to learn as much as possible.
Definitely. I always take on a new client and say, you don't want me to have to be your coach forever, so I'm going to give you all of the tools, all of the information. So once you've reached that goal, you can walk away from me and carry on your lifestyle the way you want it to be. I'm still going to be here for any kind of queries or questions that you may have, but you can feel free to go on without having to think, shit, I need to phone Vic because I'm stuck on this or I'm stuck on that.
Yeah.
That's how it is.
Yeah. Teach them how to fish rather than give them a fish.
Exactly, right? Everyone. And they'll live forever. That's it.
Yeah. And the other thing too, related, and we'll probably run out of time here, though, is people don't often know what their goals are.
No, I know. It's shocking, right?
Yeah.
I don't get it. It's just like, what do you want to achieve with me? Well, I want to get a bit leaner. I want to get a bit stronger.
Right. Yeah, I had a client. I was actually a trainer at a gym that I owned, and he was a personal trainer. Like he sort of he wasn't the greatest personal trainer. Awesome guy, just hilarious guy to have around. But he would come to me like with sort of a new idea all the time. I'm like, well, what do you want? Where are you trying to go with it? What's the idea? What's your long-term goal? And he's like, you always ask me this question, man. I don't know. And I said, his name was Drew. I said, Andrew, it's like you're out there in the parking lot, that we're in a mini mall. It's like, you don't know where you want to go. Like, do you want to go over there and get some luggage? Do you want to go get lunch? You want to get a massage? What are you trying to do? You're just wandering around the parking lot. You don't have any idea what your direction is.
Yeah.
You're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anything done until you figure that out. And the thing is that that just speaks to the fact that we're creatures of immediate gratification.
Yeah, definitely.
There was a guy named Rod Dishman. He was the world's foremost expert on exercise adherence. He'd studied for decades, and he was at the University of Georgia when I was there. And I was really hoping to learn like the secrets of how to get people to exercise and stick with it. And he had sort of given up on that whole line of research because he realized that you can make some changes to help folks, but they need to have like some sort of immediate like brain gratification. There has to be sort of a neurochemical thing going on. And that's kind of what comes forth when you ask them what their goals are. It's like, if I felt leaner, then I would just like everything would be better in my life.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but so they're looking just for like this sort of nebulous, feeling of wellness or goodness or happiness, but they're not really sure how to make that happen. And that's why I think setting out goals and some way to sort of an important thing is some way to make every day and every aspect as much as possible of the whole process rewarding in and of itself, intrinsically rewarding.
Yeah.
Like going to the gym is just fun. I like just to go to the gym, well, then it's going to perpetuate itself.
Yeah.
So that's why Fortitude training has been so rewarding, because people say they really like training. They really dig it. It's fun. I'm like, that's perfect. You're going to keep doing it. So that makes me happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what makes you happy is what makes you stick to it, and what makes you stick to it improves your physique all over. So, and it's not just your physique, it's your mental aspect towards things as well, isn't it? So
yeah,
I think that is an excellent point to end it on, which is wicked. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find your book, and where they can like all your Instagram pictures.
Everything is Fortitude Training. FortitudeTraining.net. Fortitude, I think it's Fortitude_training, maybe at Instagram. If you just put in Scott Stevenson and Fortitude Training, it pops up everywhere.
Yeah,
so
it's cool.
Easy to find.
So I'll put all of the links on underneath the video anyway, so that all of you guys can obviously go on and follow Scott's progress. And if you have any questions, as usual, please just put them on under the comment section of the YouTube video, and either myself or Scott will obviously have a good look at them and get back to them as and when possible. Other than that, thank you ever so much, Scott. I've had a blast with you this evening. It has been so cool to see you, and I will catch up with you very, very soon.
Sounds good. Keep up the good work. This is a great podcast.
Thank you so much. Okay, take care, guys. See you soon.
Bye-bye.